I want to begin this new year talking to you about you, about the person you used to be, the person you are, the person you are going to eventually be, because what we're doing starting this week is we're going to do 4 lessons on the 4 major stages of life that all people pass through if they live long enough. Obviously, there's childhood, early childhood, which is what we'll focus on today. And then there's teenage years, adolescence. There is adulthood that takes in a broad range. And then there's senior adulthood. And so, how am I going to tie this in with a Bible character? Who do you use from the Bible to talk about 4 life stages? Well, you could go with Moses. There's a lot of information on Moses, but it tells us a little bit about when he was a little baby, then when he's 40, then when he's 80, and later years when he dies, but there's a lot of empty gaps there. The next closest would be Joseph, Old Testament Joseph. You see him as a boy, you see him as a middle-aged man, but again, big gaps. So it's hard to see all 4 life stages at work in the life of Old Testament Joseph. Even Jesus, he's our best example, he's our best model on virtually everything, but not here, because we know a whole lot about his birth, but the Bible tells us next to nothing about his childhood, so that's not going to help us. It tells us about his adulthood, but he didn't even live to senior adulthood. But there's one Bible character about whom more is written than anyone besides Jesus, and that's David. David. He's the one Bible character, especially in the Old Testament, that you read about from the time he was a child all the way up to when he died as an old man. And there aren't very many significant blank spots in there. So we're going to take what we know of David, the Bible, the best we can get from the behavioral sciences, and talk about the stages of life. And I want to take you back to an event you don't remember. At the very least, you don't consciously remember it. Although, who knows, it may be stored deep within you the moment you were born. All of us started out in life with both a problem and an opportunity. The problem was we had been living for quite some time in a very warm, secure, comfortable place where we had it all to ourselves and all our needs were met. We felt completely taken care of and secure, and all of a sudden one day, it's like earthquakes. It's like you're in the trash compactor in Star Wars and things are closing in, and next thing you know, boom, you're out in the light and it's blinding you. And if you're old enough, somebody slaps you on the behind and you noticed a sudden drop in temperature. And if you could have articulated your thoughts, you might have thought, what kind of cold, awful world is this? And if you could have known how to use language, put your feelings into words, you really might have been asking, once you came out of that womb, you might have been asking, where am I? What is this place? And who are these people standing around making funny faces at me? Are my needs going to be met here the way they were before? Because I had a pretty good thing going. And the biggest question you'd have been asking, if you could verbalize, would be this. This new world, these people I'm around all of a sudden, or whoever these funny faces are, here it is. Am I welcome here? Am I wanted here? Is it a good thing that I was born? Are they glad that I've arrived? Or can I just sense through the energy in the room that maybe I'm a problem? And maybe some of these people wish I weren't here. Am I wanted in this world? And what about these big people? What do they think about me? And though you couldn't speak, though little babies can't speak, they can pick up on the tone of a voice, and they can tell whether it's loving and nurturing or whether it is cold, inconsiderate, or even negative. They can tell when you hold them. I mean, are you one of those people who can hold a baby and make her stop crying? Anybody? Because I sure can't. I just make them cry. But sometimes I can calm them, and it has a lot to do with what kind of mindset and mood I'm in. If I'm in a calm, nurturing mood, that baby picks up on it. When you came into this world, think back, just real quick. Don't stay back in the past long. Great place to visit, terrible place to try to live. But think back. Who were some of the first people who held you? Who held you up like the Lion King and looked at you? Could you feel their love? Did you sense that they were glad you're here? Not everybody had that blessing. Whether you had it when you were first born or not, I hope that you got it as you moved along in your early childhood. Because, up to like age 9, the neuroplasticity of your brain is so much more, what's the word I'm looking for? It's more neuroplastic. That's what it is. It's shapeable. It's in a form that is like wet cement, to use a rough metaphor. And it can be shaped in a lot of different ways, but as time goes on, it gets harder and harder. And that doesn't mean it can't be changed, but some patterns are set in your thinking, in the way you perceive others and yourself very early, that are going to be there for the rest of your life. And the right people saying the right things to you as you grow up is huge. You need to know, parents and grandparents, you have an opportunity to impart some security, some sense of worth, meaning, purpose to a child's life through the way you treat them, the way you talk with them, and also by being willing to listen to them. Listening to them. If it's hard for you to listen to children, work on that. Because think about this. Do you know, as an adult, do you know of very many experiences that are any more dehumanizing than realizing you're being ignored? Sometimes I'd almost rather be cussed than to be completely ignored as if I don't matter at all. Well, what I am is a man who's still part child, and that part of me will always be there. Listen to what they have to say. You signal to another person, adult or child, your spouse. Bingo, your spouse. You signal to them how important they are to you by whether or not you will sit still, look them in the eye, and listen without interrupting. Sam Keen wrote a lot about this sort of thing in children, and he told about this in the deathbed of his father. His father, old man, in his last days, fourth stage, that we'll come to much later. But Sam Keen felt this need rise up in him to make a very affirming statement to his father on his father's deathbed. I want to show it to you. Here's what he said to his father. He's speaking on his behalf and on behalf of the other kids. You have given us the best single gift a parent could give. You took delight in us. Now leave that there a second, Jeff. I'm going to come way over here to read that one more time. You have given us the best single gift a parent could give. You took delight in us. Another way of saying that is we grew up from our earliest memories knowing Daddy was glad we are here. Gordon Crosby had a similar, not Crosby, but Cosby, had a similar quote that I want to follow up with. Now let this one sink in. This is heavy. It'll reach down your throat and grab you by the gut. The first and foremost responsibility of parents is to enjoy their children. Oh, I thought it was to make sure they got good grades. Hey, there's a whole lot of things that are important. There's 101 different things we need to teach our children. Practical things, academic things, athletic things, and all that's important and all of it's valuable. But you know what? The slab, the concrete slab that all of that sits on is them knowing you enjoy them. You just like being around them, even when they're at the age when they haven't yet done anything impressive. They've never taken a test. They've never tried out for Little League. They've never been to a dance lesson. Nothing. But if they can sense from the beginning that you take delight in them, that you enjoy them, then all the rest has a solid foundation to build on. Without that, you know what? If they don't grow up sensing that you enjoy them, then when it comes time to start achieving, accomplishing, winning, succeeding, because that bottom basic foundation that when it comes right down to it, my parents just delight in me and they enjoy me whether I'm winning or losing, whether I had a good game or a bad game. You know what's going to happen? Their image of themselves will go up and down. Sometimes they'll be down in a bog because they struck out or made a D because there's no concrete there. Other times they'll be up on the top of a ladder because they made a good tackle, because they were obviously one of the top dancers on the stage. Up and down, most people's image of themselves constantly goes up and down. Now, a certain amount of up and down is okay as long as you've got the bottom foundation laid. You know that the baseline is, it's good that I'm here. It's already good, so anything else good I do is only going to make good better. And anything bad I do still won't cancel out the basic goodness that I was that I had from the beginning with my parent. My little nephew Blake Sawyer is in this stage. I want to show you one more picture of him. You can't even quite see him because another adolescent nephew has his hand in the wrong place. But what I want you to pay attention to, this is little Blake. He's like 9 months old, sitting up, not even yet crawling. Melina's on one side. That's his mother, Candace, on the other side. A cousin. And what I want you to notice is he's the centerpiece. He's right there in the center, in the middle. And he is surrounded by people who take delight in him. And I can tell you one thing about that little fella. There's no doubt in his mind. He doesn't know much. And what little he does know, he doesn't know how to put into English, but he knows this. We are glad he's in this world. It was not a mistake. It was not a bad thing that he showed up. And that right there, a foundation for a life is being set. Well, that's the kind of foundation God intended us all to have. You go back to the very beginning, Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. 131, look at this. God saw everything that he had made. This is just after he made human beings in his likeness. God saw everything that he had made, and behold, he took a good long look. It was very good. God took delight in his creation from the beginning. And when you know on some deep level that the people who put you in this world and first knew you, believed in you, took delight in you, saw your coming as a good thing, that doesn't mean you won't ever have problems. It doesn't mean you won't ever question yourself or have negative thoughts about what you are or what you are becoming, but it does mean you can only sink so low, because at the bottom you know you are delighted in. Very, very good. But it doesn't take long for other people to start cutting our legs out from under us or throwing mud at us. Brene Brown, a researcher from the University of Houston. You may be familiar with Brene Brown's work. She wrote a bestseller, The Gifts of Imperfection, among others. She is the graduate professor of social work at the University of Houston, and she works a lot with this whole idea of belonging, having a sense of belonging, fitting in. And she goes around the country and she visits with middle schoolers, because by the time a kid's in middle school, it starts becoming obvious how they see themselves and how the people at home see them. I heard her in an interview recently with Krista Tippett, and here's what she said. I started talking about fitting in and belonging, and several of the kids immediately blurted out and said, "Excuse me, Miss Brown, there's a difference in fitting in and belonging, you know. Did you know that? There's a difference between fitting in and actually belonging in a place, in a group." Here's what the kids said. Lord, listen to what the children say. Listen to the little children. They said this: fitting in is something you do when you want to fit in. You want to fit in, so you modify yourself, or you work on this, or you put on this persona so that you can fit in. It's something you do in order to fit in with others. Okay? Got that? Belonging. Here's what the middle schoolers have said all over the country. Belonging is not about you trying to fit in. Belonging is when, get this now. Belonging is when others want you in. Does anybody know the difference? Do you see the difference? Our kids go out into a wide, wide world to seek their fortune. And they're going to try to fit in. And they're going to do things because they want to fit in. There'll be others who want them in, but not everybody's going to want your kids and grandkids in their group, just like they didn't want you in their group. And probably, if you're like me, you still got people who don't want you in their group. I know what I'm talking about. People who don't want you in their group. They don't want you to belong because you don't belong. And so whether you're 3, if you were 3, you wouldn't be paying attention right now. Whether you're 9 or 90, you're 90 years old, like Todd Coogan over here, 90 years old, or 9 years old, you still have a need to belong somewhere. And there are some places you will belong. And I pray this is one of those places you belong because you recognize that others want you in. You need places and people like this. Otherwise, you'll desperately run around all over the place to all sorts of people and groups and social stratas and professions and people with different degrees trying to fit in with them. That's a never-ending story. Never-ending story that never gives you any relief. The last thing about Brene Brown, I got to tell you this. What one little girl spoke up and said, all this fitting in, belonging stuff, one little girl raised her hand and said, Miss Brown, it's tough when you don't fit in at school. It's tough. She said, but I'll tell you what's way, way worse than not fitting in at school. It's when you don't belong in your own home and you know it. And Brene Brown said that when the girl made that statement about not belonging in your own family and you know it, that half the classrooms immediately, half the people in the classrooms immediately either began crying visibly or putting their head down on their desk. So we're talking about something common. We're talking about something you can do something about as an adult for young people. You can help this become more and more and more of a place where people of all ages instinctively sense they belong and they are wanted in this home and in your home. Reality is, though, that some of us did not grow up with that. My little nephew Blake, he is one of the fortunate ones. I guarantee you, not everybody in this room grew up with your little baby basket on a table and 6 to 12 people sitting around the table just marveling over you. Not all of us got that. Some of you might have found yourself in a circle with 6 to 12 peers or relatives standing around mocking, berating, bullying you. So what do? What if you don't get it at home? What if you're one of those who don't belong in your own home, or you didn't belong, or you know a kid, maybe one of your own grandkids who didn't belong and doesn't? Here's the good news. The way things are structured in this universe is that the family of origin is the first place a child gets the opportunity to belong, to be delighted in. That's the first, and I'd argue the most ideal place for a child to belong. But if that doesn't happen, you are not destined for doom. God is filled with backup plans. And there are many other people in this world who can sub, who can pinch hit and switch out and actually perform some of those belonging tasks for you that somebody else neglected. That's actually Scripture. I want to take you to David now, because the part of his life we know the least about is his childhood. About the only thing we do know about David's childhood is that he was the youngest of 10 brothers, which, by the way, meant he would not receive any inheritance. Okay? Youngest of 10 brothers. His job was to take care of the sheep. And we also know from one incident that his older brothers and even his father, get this now, David's father, this boy who was going to become the greatest king of Israel, the Israelis to this day have the Star of David on their flag. He was kind of a big deal. But when he was a boy, his brothers didn't see it. And even his father didn't see it. Because when Samuel the prophet came to town to anoint a king, God had said, it's going to be one of Jesse's sons. And so Samuel said to Jesse, bring all your sons in front of me. And as each one went by, the Lord would somehow communicate to Samuel, it's not this one, it's not this one, it's not this one, not this one, all the way to the end of the line. And Samuel, the confused prophet, was wondering if there was a loose wire between him and God. And he said, whoa, none of these are the one. Don't you have any other children? Well, I guess you could call it that. We do have David. You know, that's the one that takes care of the sheep. And Samuel said, go get him. We will sit down and we will do nothing else until he gets here. And they went and brought David. And when Samuel, the prophet, the man of God, saw him, the Spirit of God welled up in Samuel and said, arise and anoint him, for this is he. And the oil of anointing poured down David's head and onto the ground. And that was the first time in his life, he was probably 13 or 14 years old, that anybody had ever looked at David and said, you belong. God delights in you, and so do I. And though his brothers didn't get the message, they were even making fun of him when he showed up later on to try to fight Goliath. He now believed in himself because somebody outside his family had let him know he belonged. It was good that David was here. And through Samuel's influence, David got to see himself the way God sees him. You know, there's there's 11 different ways of seeing yourself, but there's two major ways of seeing yourself. If you had to categorize it, there's seeing yourself or thinking of yourself, your self-image, whatever. The way you see yourself based on what you've concluded through your interactions with others. What they've criticized, what they've bragged on, whatever. There's that. And then there's the way God sees you. And I don't care who you are, I can promise you this. There's a drastic difference between the two. Because as God said to Samuel in this passage from 1 Samuel 16, God looks on the heart. God looks to the heart of things. He sees things, potential in you that are not yet visible to anybody else. Whereas on the other hand, human beings just look on the outward appearance. What kind of grades does she make? How many times did he strike out this year? How many kids gave him Valentine's last year? I mean, that's a good way to evaluate how well you belong. There's the way you've been taught to see yourself by the world and the way God sees you. And you will live and operate out of one of those two self-understandings. If you operate based on how the world sees you, you will be up and down, in and out, strung out, stressed out for the rest of your life, trying to be whatever it is you think you're supposed to be. But if you ever really grasp who God made you to be, that may not be easy, but it is simple. It means be authentic. It means be yourself. It doesn't mean accept your weaknesses. As part of accepting yourself, you accept, okay, I've got these strengths that I'm going to develop, and I've got these weaknesses that I've got to work on. But I'm not doing it so somebody else will let me fit in. I already belong with God. He's got stuff for me, and I want it to happen. Now, let me wrap this up. Let me say it this way. If the family fails, if your family failed to let you know you belonged, your story's not over. Because God has other people positioned all over the place who can be your Samuel. The people who can step in and take delight in you because they see in you what God has put there. They see things that the kids at school didn't see, or maybe even your parents didn't see. In the last 25 years of life, for me, the most significant, positive, inspiring influences for me have been people I've met along the way who have no blood relation to me at all. Those people are there. Look for them. And when you find your Samuel, I got to say this, you got to be looking for your Samuel. You got to be open to your Samuel, and you got to recognize you need one. You can spend the next 20 years puffed up and trying to be big and arrogant, hot shot, successful. And a lot of that may even be true, but that's not really who you are. That's a role you're playing to try to fit into somebody else's concept of what you ought to be. And that will never give you any fulfillment. Don't spend any more time in that department than you have to. Recognize, I don't just want to fit in. I want to belong. I want to find what I was born to do and discover who God has made me and connect with the people He's sending into my life, the Samuels, who can pull that potential out of me and help mold me mentally, physically, and most of all, spiritually.